He's going to share with us, amongst other things, how to find opportunity during these challenging times. And there is nobody better to interview our guest speaker than Ilana Africa. Ilana, you have a way of asking all the right questions that most people think of. Tonight is not just a Zoom, it's been streamed on Facebook and YouTube as well. So thank you both very much. Over to you, Ilana.
Thank you so much, Chaya. And Ian, it is such a pleasure to finally meet you and to have the opportunity to have your time. Now, most people in your position don't have a lot of time. And so we appreciate you taking our questions. Speaking of which, you will have an opportunity to ask some questions tonight. So please, in the chat, connect with us and ask as many questions as you would like. But Ian, before I even start, I must say it is a privilege for us to be able to sit here because up until this point, the first wave and also the second wave of coronavirus have passed us. You've been affected.
Hi, Ilana, and thanks very much for having me. Yes, I was. My wife and I were both infected in July last year. It was quite rough, but we managed to stay out of hospital, thankfully, and we got through it. I must say it wasn't pleasant, and there's still a couple of lingering things. I have a thing called tinnitus, which is ringing in the ears, still as a result of the COVID, and so does my wife have it. And so, yeah, but other than that, we're fine, and we're ready for the next round, and we'll be going strong at the moment.
Now, one would imagine that when you are strong and when you come out of something like that, you realize that there's an opportunity to give, to talk, to have conversations. And it's such a privilege to also talk to you about opportunities in COVID. But Chaya said something wonderful when we started. She said, if you've walked into a Sorbet and you've walked out of one, you probably know the guy behind it. And for those of you that haven't heard your story, tell me about it.
Right, the Sorbet story. Okay, so it started on a massage table, actually, believe it or not. I was having a massage, a legitimate massage, of course, and I was having a beauty therapist was talking to me, and I just previously sold my last business called Supermart. It was a retail chain that I had sold to Edcon, and I was looking for a new business. I was 51 years old at the time, and I was thinking about new things. And she said to me, why don't you look at the beauty industry? And I said, well, I mean, look at this face. This is not a face for the beauty industry. And I used to use old soap once or twice a week to wash my face. So I wasn't really into the beauty scene at all. But then she said, you know, there's a big gap in the market, she said. And I said, yeah, but is there a market in the gap? And she said, yes. There's no beauty salon chains in South Africa. There's not a single branded chain of beauty salons across the country. And that really sparked my interest. I thought, okay, well, here we go. Let's go and find out about this. And she was right. And I looked into it. And a little bit later, 2004, I started buying up a couple of independent salons to learn the business. And then 2005, we launched the brand with 6 salons. But I think the important thing here, which was a little different to my previous entrepreneurial ventures, was in most cases when you're an entrepreneur, you come up with an idea and you think of something and then you start it, you try and build it up, and then you try and build the culture. But in this case, I already had the culture because culture has been my fascination for the last 45 years of my entrepreneurial life. So I had a blueprint for a culture, and I wanted to implement that into a business. So it was the other way around. I started with the culture, then I found the opportunity, and then went ahead and started to build the business. And so as a result of that, I used to do all the induction training myself for every single person that ever joined the Sorbet. So I could teach them about the culture and about the philosophy and the purpose and the values and all of those things. And I suppose if I look back at it, and if you look at the one competitive advantage that we had at Sorbet, was the attitude and the culture and our staff's attitude towards service. And the relationship between culture and service was the key. And I'm very pleased to hear Chaya say that she always used to feel better when she left than when she arrived. And that was the philosophy. It was about touching people's lives and making them feel good about themselves. So we weren't really selling products or treatments. We were just really selling a feeling, and we called it Get That Feeling. And that's a little bit of a summary. It was hard in the beginning, I must tell you, Ilana. The first 4 or 5 years we called the dark days. It took a while to get the culture settled. But then eventually we started to sell franchises. And then at the time that I left, we had about 220 franchises across the country.
What's exciting is all the things that you are saying around culture. The feeling, we've had conversations in this space around lepidology, the feeling of adapting to your environment, and also the sense of touch, that you're not selling a product necessarily, but a feeling, and also a feeling of touch, because we love being hugged, or, when someone tickles your back, there's a sensation that you get that makes you feel better, makes you feel good. Yeah. But you said something that takes me back now. I remember living in Randburg at the time. I was young and unmarried, and, I had a lot of time on my hands. I didn't have little children like I do now. And at the time, I used to have my nails done at a place called Jane's. And I used to meet Jane, and I would see her there, and I would always think, oh, what a businesswoman, So I really looked up to her. And then at some stage, the next time I came, 2 weeks later to have my nails done, the shop front had changed, and all of a sudden it was in beautiful pastels, and the circular, the bubble, the bubble feeling, and it said Sorbet. And I remember saying to the staff, what's going on? What is Sorbet? And it was like someone had done a transformation of sorts, because they had transformed into something completely different. It's like someone had come and waved a magic wand and made things different. And so that was my experience from it. And you just named it. And I want to know more about this word culture, because, Ian, I'm thinking of all the entrepreneurs that would want your time. Want to build our businesses, and perhaps we have that startup already, but the word culture feels like it changes everything within that business. What do you describe as culture? Is it the same as business culture?
Yes, it is. It's business culture. In fact, I have a word called cultureneering, which is a process. Yes, I just made that up actually the other day, and I'm now writing a book about it. But it's really about trying to create a strong culture in a diverse workforce, and that's really important, because we have really diverse workforces in South Africa, that will ultimately lay the platform for obsessive customer service, and to recognize the very strong correlation between culture and service. So I always say that the customer experience will never be better than the staff experience. So if the staff are not happy, the customers are not going to be happy. So it's really important right from the outset to build a strong culture with a strong reason for being, a purpose. And that was the thing, at first, I used to think in the old days that our reason for being was to try and become the #1 beauty salon chain in the country. But in actual fact, my daughter said to me, and she was our group marketing manager, Jade, and she said, but who cares if you're #1, right? Because the staff don't care, the customers don't really care. Let's really get to the bottom of what is our reason for being. Mm-hmm. And we looked at that, and the reason for being was to touch people's lives, to make them feel good about themselves. So if you can do that, and you can start to get people to understand that the purpose of work is to serve, not to make money. Most people come to work to make money. They think, okay, I'm going to earn a salary, so I'm going to do what I have to do to earn a salary. Right. And I would say to them, no, that's wrong. Because if you've come to work for your own purposes, I would call you an I specialist, a person who specializes in themselves, and I'm here for me. I want to make money. I want to grow. I. But the reality is that you come to work to serve the needs and wants of other people. And if you do that well, you'll make money. And that's where we have to shift the paradigms at work. This is not about making money. It's about making people feel good. And if they feel good, they'll come back. And if they come back, you'll make money. And so that's how it should always be: service before reward, never the other way.
Right. If you just joined in, we're chatting to Ian Fuhr, serial entrepreneur, and also his books are out. He's working on one at the moment, and there's also a platform soon that I want you to go and visit. We'll talk all about it. And so far we've talked about cultureneering, a word that he's developed that is around business culture and culture. what strikes me is the relationship between customer. You know, that saying of the customer is always right, and you know, there's a lot around the customer, but I like how you bring this word of addiction in it, or obsessive customer service. You know, that as a consumer, I almost feel like you are really looking out for me when you say that. But I want to take 2 steps back. I mean, culture almost feels like purpose.
Yes.
It does feel like. So my question is, if we hardly know what our own purpose or talent is, how do we know that in business? How do we even build a culture in business? You know, it's the same way that people say, you know, I was born for purpose, but what is my purpose? So how do you start a business and build culture? Where do you even start?
Okay, so the first question is, what do our customers want? Why are we here? For what purpose? Because if we don't know what we're going to be doing for our customers and how we're going to meet their needs and wants, then we'll never be able to find our purpose. Because you don't go into business just to make money. Most people think, okay, I'm going to start a business and I'm going to make money and I'm going to be rich and famous. That is a sure way to fail. So don't do that. Rather, find what the customers want. Find that niche. Find out how you can not only meet their needs, but exceed their expectations. And then you'll be able to start to build a business. So that purpose is so important. It's so really important. And also the purpose of work, why you come to work. And then you need to have some core values which will support your purpose. So if you're going to do something, for us, it was about touching people's lives and making them feel good about themselves. And then we had to have some core values. And those values were things like integrity and things like being able to refund people. I don't know if you remember, there used to be a sign in the store that said, if you're not happy, you don't have to pay.
Your money back, yeah.
Correct. And that was really the crux of the whole matter. Was that if people came in and they weren't happy with it, they didn't have to pay. And that was how we started to build our reputation of service, that we really believed that, you know, and the customer was the purpose of our being, and everything we did had to have the customer at the center of everything.
I'm thinking of everyone who's watching who has a startup. You know, you find this idea and you want to build culture. What do you do when you don't have the buy-in of staff in the culture that you create? How does one approach that? I mean, is it something that you teach or train? Is it something that you force because we have to, because this is what I want? I'm the boss and the CEO. How do you create a culture in your business that's addictive, even for staff?
Okay, so that's the challenge, and that's why I did all the induction training myself, because I wasn't prepared to let that go. It's so critical to be able to shift the paradigm from I come to work to make money to I come to work to serve. And you have to try and do that. And over the years, it took some time, I must be honest. It wasn't something that happened overnight. But I think towards the end, the large majority of people, if you walked into a Sorbet, at the time that I would left, I would suggest that at least 80% of them, if you ask them, why do you come to work? That's how I come to work to serve. And that became the thing. It was a privilege to be able to serve people and to make them feel good. I mean, how many people get an opportunity like that? So it wasn't just about doing nails or waxing or massage or whatever it was. It really was, at the end of the day, about getting people to feel good about themselves. And that is an honor. It's a privilege to be able to do that, to serve people in such a way that makes them feel happy. So it became addictive. And if people didn't quite get it, if we still had the eye specialists who came to work for their own purposes and not really for those of the customers, well, then we would sit them down, and explain to them that if they weren't happy at Sorbet, then perhaps they should be somewhere else, because if they were with us, they had to be willing to serve first and then get reward second. So we weren't shy to get people to understand that this was it. If you wanted to be part of our culture, you needed to put service first, always.
Well, speaking about putting service first, we have some comments. Felicia says, it was an honor to serve alongside you. What would be your advice be to some of us who are a little bit anxious? How do we make it happen when everything is against you economically, emotionally, and otherwise? So Felicia says, thank you. Thank you. What you've taught me. But there is a sense of anxiety, even to all of us who have got the talent, to all of us who feel we are living the culture, to all of us that, I mean, yesterday I listened to a conversation around businesses and how many restaurants have lost their gig, you know, they've had to give up. And so as someone who's fairly positive and who creates business and ideas and who motivates thousands of people, Ian, millions of people, what would you say to all of us who are trying to make business in a pandemic? No one saw it coming.
Yeah, no one saw it coming, and it's really tough. I must say, I really feel sorry for the people at Sorbet at the moment, and everyone else who is having to experience this incredibly uncertain future at the moment. So I think the only reason that you can move forward here is if you try and find ways to get around the old traditional things that you've always done. If you do what you've always done, then don't be surprised if you get what you've always got. So at the end of the day, you need to look at how can I do things differently, and there are no easy answers here. I mean, there's certainly no quick fix to getting out of this COVID situation. It's really tough, and I don't want to pretend that it's easy at all. And so you just need to be creative and try and find those things. Like, you know, as an entrepreneur, I would suggest you need 3 strong characteristics. The first one is you need to have intuition. And intuition is that special feeling that you have that you are inherently right in what you're doing, but you just don't have the evidence to prove it. Okay, it's like pioneering, and I'll come to that now. The second thing that you need is courage, because at this point in time, we all need a lot of courage. We need to face our fears, and we need to overcome them, because courage is not the absence of fear. It is the ability to overcome that fear. And so we need courage at this time of our lives. And then we also need that determination for the long haul, to be able to say, right, I'm going to stick through this, even though it's tough as hell. I'm going to get my head down and I'm going to go. And think of it as a pioneer. You know, in the old movies and the Westerns, they would be the pioneers who would be going out into the unknown territories and facing all these dangers and not knowing what was around the next corner. And they didn't have a map. They had to create their own map. And that's what entrepreneurship does. You create your own map. And you then have to pass that map on to the settlers who are standing behind you, waiting at the top of the mountain to see how you go. And then you can say to them, you know, they ask you, is it safe out there now? And you say, no, it's not safe. But I'm here and I'm forging forward, and I've got the courage to keep going. And that's really what this is about at the end of the day, is that pioneering spirit that says, I'm going to do this, even though I have no idea what the outcome is going to be, because I believe in it. I truly believe in what I'm doing.
Your sense of hope feels like it is just part of your essence. And so even if you were the cowboy traveling through the desert, you were armed. You had a horse, and you surely had a gun that was loaded. And so what if your ammunition is hope, where does yours come from? And I mean, how do you ignite it? How do you stay with it even through a pandemic? And I'm going to ask something, and I don't mean to be controversial, but I know a lot of people, I stay in Gauteng at the moment, and I know a lot of people that, for instance, want to immigrate because they think it's better elsewhere than in South Africa. And so if your ammunition is hope, why is it so strong with you, so strong that you want to create a diverse business and awareness in South Africa?
Okay, so that's a whole nother topic altogether. And I'm going to bring in my other passion in life, which is race relations. So for many, many years, I have been really interested and passionate about race relations and trying to create some sort of social justice in this country. I know that it's strange for a white person to be saying that, but it's just fact. And so I look at this and I say, try and understand how we got into the situation in the first place in South Africa. So, just remove the pandemic for a moment. Just look at South Africa as we were and as we are in terms of a divided nation of people, and the 300 years of history that have created a very strong sense of white superiority over the years and black inferiority and everything that goes with that. So we have deeply ingrained feelings about race in South Africa. And as a result, we need to understand how those inequalities and the social injustice that is taking place in this country is impacting on us today. So as a business, for example, we need to understand the socio-political situation outside of our business and how it's impacting on us inside the business. So if you have a diverse workforce, you need to understand all of the issues that surround things like unconscious bias, like prejudice, the differences between prejudice, discrimination, and racism, which I can quickly share with you. Prejudice is the thought that you can judge somebody. It's a prejudgment of a person that comes from a different group to you. It's a prejudgment. Discrimination is when you act out on your prejudices. That's when you start to do something about it. And then racism is when you have prejudice and discrimination, and it comes from a position of power. And this is what we call systemic racism. So if you translate all of that into your business, if you understand that you have this racially polarized environment outside of your business and probably inside your business as well, and if you can't deal with it, if you can't create a culture where you have a true sense of belonging, that everybody feels that they are equally respected, trusted, and valued for their contribution, they are treated with dignity and equality. If you can't create that, you will never be able to create a culture that delivers great service. People will not do that. So I have that sort of endless hope that we can overcome so many of our ingrown stereotypes that we have in our lives and our prejudices. And we start to realize that as whites in particular, that we have been privileged, and a lot of young white people will say to me, but I wasn't there during apartheid. Don't blame me for the sins of my fathers and all that stuff. And yes, you were not a perpetrator, but you are a beneficiary. You certainly are a beneficiary. And if you have privilege, you come from that privileged background. So you need to understand that life in South Africa is not going to be better if we do not make some compromises. If we try to just sort of extend the status quo, that inequality gap is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's why we need to understand the impact of white privilege. We need to understand the importance of Black economic empowerment in its way of redressing the inequalities of our past, so that we can actually give everybody an opportunity to participate in the economy and in life in general in South Africa on an equal footing. And so that is a big part of what we do. And in the new company, we have race relations courses, for example. But just to get back to the issue of hope, because that's where this question started. Hope has become a real challenge in South Africa because there's been so much negativity, and as the rabbi was saying earlier on before we started, there's so much negativity, and it's all consuming this negativity because there's all the kind of things that are going on, and I don't have to repeat everything. It's an endless list of negative stuff. And if we want to change hopelessness into hopefulness, the only way we can really do that is to start changing individual mindsets. We have to start to change the mindsets of the people of this country so that they start to understand, how did we get ourselves into this mess? What are my own racial biases? What are my unconscious biases? How am I going to discover, what I'm doing that is standing in my own way and is standing in the way of progress in South Africa? How can I change myself? Not how can I change someone else? People like leaders in business, they always want to change everyone to suit their culture. But in actual fact, the only way you can do that is when you change yourself first. You can't become a leader with what I call the moral authority to lead if you are going to be wanting to change people and not show them that you can transform yourself first as an individual, and that you can challenge your own biases. Because change never comes from a position of comfort, never. Change only comes when there's discomfort, when your views and your beliefs and your paradigms are being challenged by others, and you start to truly listen to what they say. Because you can never learn when you are speaking. You can only ever learn when you are listening. So you need to listen to the views of others, even though you might completely disagree with them, because that's how you learn. When you've been taken out of your comfort zone. And that's why we need to have what we call these uncomfortable and courageous conversations about all these contentious issues that surround race in South Africa. For too long, we've pussyfooted around them and not actually tackled it head on. And it's so important that we do that at this time. And that's how we're going to build hope for this country, and give people that sense that there is a rosy future, that there is some kind of prosperity, for everybody. Because prosperity for some is not prosperity at all. It's got to be, everybody has to be included in this. And that requires a lot of compromise, a lot of changes, a lot of ability to understand yourself, discover your own things that are blocking your way in terms of your stereotypes, your prejudices, your beliefs that have been there for many, many years and have created this problem in the first place.
It makes me excited to think that there are so many themes around creating a business, or even being in this challenging environment of a pandemic, when we touch on the things like diversity and hope and culture and cultureneering, and even how to unlearn, our bad habits and to relearn all the good ones. If I think of your passion for diversity and hope, because the next project that I want to touch on, it's all about that. Yeah. But if we think of your passion for diversity, where did it start? Someone planted that seed, or something. What happened?
Okay, well, I think if I go right back to the very beginning, I was about 7 years old in Johannesburg. I was born in Vanderbijl Park, actually. Some people say, why were you born in Vanderbijl Park? Never quite sure about that question. But I said because I wanted to be close to my mother. She happened to be there at the time. And so I went there to be born. And then I left when I was about 4 years old, and I was living in Johannesburg, and my older brothers, I'm the youngest of 5, my older brothers took me to watch a rugby match at Ellis Park, age 7, 1960. It was South Africa versus the All Blacks. And we didn't have tickets, so we had to stand in a long queue outside, and we had to arrive very early at 4 o'clock in the morning. We arrived, and we sat in the queue. And it was all quiet, and it was fine. There was no problem. Of course, the queue was all white, and a lot of Afrikaans-speaking people. And then as dawn came and it started to get light, we started to see the stream of black workers that came walking down the street past us. And I was just standing there, and then all of a sudden, some of the guys in the queue started taking out these nachos out of a bag and started pelting these guys with nachos. And they just scattered all over the place. And I was completely dumbstruck, 7 years old, and I'm watching this, and they're shouting and swearing. I didn't know what they were saying. Speaking Afrikaans, I don't know what they said. But it was just horrific. And these people were running down the street and trying to get away from these guys. And I asked my brother, I said, what's going on here? What is this about? And one of my brothers said, welcome to apartheid here.
Wow.
And so I'll never forget that as long as I live. And I look back now, and I think that was probably the beginning of it all. And then when I started working, I went into the Air Force after school. And then I went and very successfully dropped out of university after my second year. And then I went into and to work for a record company, Gala Records. That's another of my story. One day we'll share that. I was in business with Kaifa Semenya and Leto Mbulu for many years, but that's another story. So I was working for a record company, and my brother came back from America, and he said there's a business called Kmart in the States, which is these huge departmental discount stores. And he said, we need to open one of these in South Africa. I was 22 years old at the time. I had no idea about anything. He said, it's a discount store. We need to aim it at the black market. I didn't know what the black market was. I mean, I came from a totally privileged white background. I know what he was talking about. I thought maybe it was this illicit market, black market. So he said, we're going to aim it at the black market, and we're going to make a killing. I said, okay. So I said, that's great, but who's going to run this, you know? He said, you are.
Yeah.
I said, really? I don't know anything about retailing, discounting. I know nothing about the products. I know nothing about the black market. I know nothing about advertising. So I said what most naive 22-year-old boys would say. I said, sure, let's do this thing. So we then opened Kmart in the middle of 1976. Funny enough, something else happened in the middle of 1976. The month we were due to open, the Soweto riots took place, and the country was burning, and we had to postpone our opening until the 1st of July. And that whole episode and the business that followed was called Kmart, which eventually became Supermart and was eventually sold to Edcon, was started in 1976, and I was the only white person in that business. So the staff were all black, the customers were all black, and it was a really big, eye-opening learning experience, because people would say to me, you know, it's all very well working, and my staff would say to me, it's all very well working in this environment, and I thank you for the job, but when I go home in the afternoons, I'm harassed by the police. I said, why are you harassed by the police? I said, no, they're looking for this, they're looking for that. You can be arrested at any time for some ridiculous apartheid law. And he said to me, freedom first, work second. Oh, that was a big message. And I thought, okay, I need to find out what's going on. So I found myself, one of our supervisors became my mentor. And I said, okay, you're going to teach me everything there is to know about being black in South Africa. And he said, right, if you're serious, right. So he took me into the townships. He took me to Shabines. He took me to visit his home and his parents. And I learned, and I was like a sponge, and I was absorbing. And it was horrifying, all the things that I heard about the laws and about Bantu education. And it was just one thing after another. So I became quite obsessed about it. And I got my hands on everything I could possibly find about apartheid and about racism. And so I learned all the laws. I knew exactly what it was. And it was quite unusual for a young white Jewish boy to be doing that at that time. And that's probably why I wrote the first book. The first book of mine it's a lot about that. Because I just couldn't get over the fact that there was this incredible injustice. And we whites were just living, oblivious and being hidden by it. And we had been manipulated to believe that we were superior and that black people were inferior and didn't deserve to have an equal opportunity. That's what we really believed. And so I started to challenge every paradigm I'd ever lived with up until that point. And I suppose that's where my passion started.
I listen to your stories of diversity, and it's like listening to a document. You know, you're a walking encyclopedia of documents and documentation, like a documentary. You know, Stephen Goldberg just said a comment. He said such a powerful, infectious message from decades of hard work and great experiences. How well is this message being received? And you've just said a few things. I mean, you've said a lot, but just the fact that it was hard, or that 44 years ago, let's think about it, that was your pandemic. Yes. But that today you are reaping the benefits of a pandemic that you got through and that you learned lessons. And here we are again not the pandemic of apartheid, but a pandemic of a big germ that we don't understand, and that every scientist is trying to decipher. And we can either become paranoid for this vaccine or the pills that they give to animals, or we can manage our expectations with hope and with God and with what we know, with cultureneering, with helping others, and with understanding diversity so that we can help each other.
Sure.
Diversity also took you to this. I mean, I signed up today for the Hatch Institute,
Right.
and I want you to tell everyone what the Hatch Institute is all about.
Right. So with my passion for culture and people, I decided that after I left Sorbet that I would start a new business where I could start to share these thoughts about the people side of business. I'm not a great expert. I'm not a great businessman per se. I'm certainly not a financial wizard or anything like that. I've always just been completely hooked on the people side of business. So I thought, okay, well, let me share my experiences, because a lot of people that are involved in HR side are academics, and they have, they've learned a lot and they've got house books and things, but very few of them have had the experiences that I've had in my life. And so there's nothing that trumps experience, as far as I'm concerned. It's the book of life,
Yeah.
And so I felt that I could try and share all my experiences and the things that I've learned, all the messages I've learned over the years with other companies, with entrepreneurs, and all companies, anybody that's involved with people management in South Africa. I thought maybe we could do this. So I started the Hatch business, and if you want, I could quickly do a 2-minute run through of a slide that will explain to you what we do.
I'd love to see. Thank you.
Okay, hold on a moment. Right, so after I left Sorbet, I came to a fork in the road. It was just kind of sitting there, and so I just drove on, and then I was looking for something else, and I started the Hatch Institute, and so the Hatch Cultureneering strategy looks something like this very briefly. Okay, so you have to understand firstly the socio-political context in which we are living and working. If you don't do that, you have no chance of being able to build a culture in your organization where everyone has a sense of belonging and a common purpose. So that's really the soil on which we build this little monument that I'm going to show you now. Once we have that, the foundation is made up of 3 key things: your reason for being, which is your purpose for existence, and that is always about the customer. It's never about you. It's not your shareholders, it's not your stakeholders, it's not your bankers. It's nothing but the customer. Right? Then you have your core values. So those are the values that you're going to have to live by in order to support your reason for being and your purpose. And you must live by that. If you don't live by those, then obviously your people are never going to take them seriously. And then, of course, the purpose of work, as we mentioned earlier on, that I come to work to serve, not to make money, and to shift that paradigm. Then the next is the first pillar of the monument is people development and personal development, so that you can go out there and learn what it is about yourself that you need to change in order to have a positive impact on other people. So personal development is about taking a good hard look at yourself. There was one situation very quickly where a franchisee in the old days at Sorbet would say to me, all my staff are unhappy and they're all giving me a hard time. I said, it can't be everybody. He said, no, everybody. So I would say to her, well, run to the toilet, I would say. Find yourself a mirror. Raise your arms in a victory salute and say, I have discovered the enemy and she is me.
Wow.
So if you want to influence other people, make sure that you're able to transform yourself first. And then we say, the next step is leadership, of course. That's culture-driven leadership. So it's not all the old traditional skills that we've always used all our lives. We now have additional skills that we have to use. And those additional skills are how to navigate the socio-political environment, how to navigate the issue of racial polarization and gender discrimination in the business, how to negotiate the pandemic and deal. So today's leaders need to be much, much more well-equipped than the previous leaders of the past. And we call it servant leadership. So servant leadership is also about serving the people who are serving the people. We don't serve our bosses anymore. They need to serve us so that we can go out there and serve our customers to the best of our ability. Yeah, so serving the people who are serving the people. And then finally, it's about community building, which is essentially developing relationships across all the diverse groups in the country. So we have lots of different groups. We have gender issues, we have religious differences, we have political differences, and all of those things are in a melting pot of diversity in our organization. And if we don't manage that properly, that sense of belonging that we all need so desperately in our businesses is never going to occur. And if you can do that effectively, you build a culture of common purpose where everybody comes to work for the same reason. In traditional companies, management comes to make profit and staff come to earn salary. Now that is an inherent conflict of interest from the word go, because the higher the salaries, the lower the profit and vice versa. So then they get unions in to come and fight their battles. And there's absolutely no common purpose. They are both pulling in different directions, and we wonder why the productivity levels in South Africa are so poor. But if you create a business where everybody comes to serve, then there's no conflict of interest. There's no us and them, and everybody's just getting on with it and creating wealth for all. So a culture with common purpose is key. And then finally, the most important thing of all is obsessive customer service. And that essentially is about exceeding the expectations and making customers your absolute focal point in everything you do. Not money, customers. If they are happy, the money will come. And the smiling attitude face is what we want. Sometimes I walk into a supermarket, I should say, and I see the cashiers and they're not looking happy at all. And I'd go up to them and say, now what's wrong? Yeah, what do you mean what's wrong? Say, are you happy? Of course I'm happy. And then I'd say, well, if you're happy, tell your face. And so that is what we do. So we're starting a cartoon series now at Hatch. And so this is the first one, which hasn't been launched yet. So this is a bit of a sneak preview. And you can see there that Lucy is putting up a sign, management must focus on diversity and inclusion. Boss says, what is this? She says, it's your final written warning.
I love it.
Right. So now I need to just while we're here, quickly, just want to show you the two books that I've written, Get That Feeling, which was released in 2014, which is my entrepreneurial journey, and then The Soul of Sorbet, which was all about the culture that we created at Sorbet.
Sure. The Hatch Institute. Yeah, this is valuable stuff. And I look at this and I from the feeling to the culture to cultureneering to the challenges in a pandemic and where it can take you if you listen to the people, obsessive customer service. I think we've learned so much. And so when's the third book coming? When are you wanting to release your next book?
I'm hoping it'll be out. I've just been talking to my publishers, and I'm hoping it'll be out sometime June, July this year. Yeah.
We appreciate your contribution to South Africa and to every young person. And so we know that any person over the age of 50 who's made some money can retire, but you are plowing your talent and your energy into teaching South Africa some of the lessons that you've learned over the years. And I want to thank you. I want to thank you because we need you. And we need hope. And we need positivity. and we need diversity, and we need inclusivity. And if you are happy, tell your face. I love that. Ladies and gentlemen, Ian Fuhr, yay! And the crowd goes wild. I love that feeling.
Good.
Ian, this has
Thank you
been
so
so
much.
super special. Thank you so much. To
Thank
find
you.
out more, you have to Google this. It's called the Hatch Institute. Sign up to learn more and to also learn more about how you can create a culture within your business, how you can create a culture within your home. Cultureneering. Thank you so much, Ian. This was remarkable.
Thank you.
Wow.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. Thank you,
Anytime.
Rabbi.
This will be live on Facebook as well as on social media on Chabad.org. And I think Chaya's back. Hey, Chaya.
Good. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you, Ian, for sharing your valuable tools on entrepreneurship with us, as well as your life success story. It was honestly a pleasure, so interesting and truly inspiring. You've taught us all so much tonight. Thank you, Ilana, for asking the relevant, most interesting questions, which enabled us to get such wonderful tips and information out of here. That was truly wonderful. Thank you both so much. Have a wonderful evening.
Good. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Chaya. Bye-bye, Ian. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye, everybody. Cheers. Thank you.